see if I can get this done. Picked up some kind of a bug yesterday. So sucks. Especially when I didn't go into town. I didn't go into any public areas. Must have came from Sarah's daughter. She went to the Barbie movie and maybe a bug jumped on her sleeve and got smuggled into the house and then set up a trap for me and got me. Hurts to swallow, but went to bed last night full on achy, dizzy, chills, rolling around like a bowling ball in bed all night, but whatever. Can't lay around sniveling, right? Kind of a bummer though, because last night I was going to take everybody down to the river and see what kind of bears were marauding around the river. And I thought I would do that today, but I'm just too achy, man. So, back to the regular routine. Sit here and share some voices. This is titled, Whoa, in caps. I apologize for the poor writing, but I couldn't write this all at once due to the experience being so surreal, yet real. I've kept thinking someone set me up, or I'm losing my mind. I've come to terms with this experience. It's gotten easier to think about over the years, but the end of this story was the hardest thing for me to accept as fact. I've told one person in 13 and a half years. My name is Anthony Sr., Tony. I'm actually a bit anxious already, but here it goes. I'm doing this now mostly to attempt to get it out of my head, off my chest. Thinking about it sometimes gives me anxiety. I don't know how people just talk about these experiences. It was so unexpected. I've had a black-tailed deer in Washington State going on 30 years. This was a great day for hunting, a hard rain and nice gusty winds. I was bow hunting, heading into my area. It's just over 6 miles in. I made it to my tree, tucked in my pack and started to ready my tree. Pulled out my rope, getting it ready to toss over a branch when I heard what sounded like a deep-voiced child crying out. I know it sounds completely nuts, but it's 100% true. And it's the only way I can come close to explain it. It sounded like a deep-voiced child. No words, just moans and crying out. It sounded so much like a child, it set off my dad's senses, filling me with urgency. I grabbed my pack and bow and headed in that direction. It was also much farther than I originally estimated it. It had a crazy voice of whatever people call the sounds they make. They have amazing control of their voices. Once it sounded far away but was close, then vice versa. There was an old overgrown caterpillar road with some trees broken and bent down on the side, also stacked very oddly. I guess the hole was naturally created in this road. The heavy rain had pooled up in an area and it sunk in around 7 feet deep. The steep, slick, and muddy sides. It was such an abrupt fall. I was worried about sliding in myself. As soon as I arrived, I announced, "I'm here. It's going to be okay," and tied the rope to a tree. It stopped making child-sounding cries. All it was doing was a off and on slight moan, like an odd hum. I continued to believe it was just a first-season young hunter that was extremely scared, maybe injured. The crying stopped immediately. Once I got directly over the hole, like someone flipped a switch. That's when the hair on the back of my neck stood straight up. I said, "It's okay, kiddo, my name's Tony, what's yours?" I tied off my tree hoist, a seat connected to a rope, and tossed it in. Then as soon as I released the rope into the hole, the shit hit the fan. I'm getting goosebumps right now. It was crazy. The trees, less than 10 yards in front of me, started to sway, and some snapping off. While a horrifying growl started, it was exactly like a pissed off bear with a deeper growl. I pulled out my 10mm from its holster and started sliding on my ass in reverse. I just knew a big black bear was going to sprint out of the trees any second. I had a flashlight in my pocket. I pulled it out and shined it down into the hole while pointing my 10mm at the trees. As soon as I seen it. At this time I was so confused I started to feel like this can't be happening. I started to think I was losing it. Then I got my first look at what I thought was a child. It was a child, but it was not a human. I panicked, fell backwards, dropping everything including my 10mm. I quickly crawled forward, scratching at the earth from my pistol, my heart beating so hard I thought a heart attack was just away. I could hear nothing but my heartbeat. I was holding my breath and clenching my teeth tightly. I kept running. What I was witnessing, trying to make sense of this in my head, I couldn't. I estimated it was just over 5 feet tall at the time, with hair all over it. Mud and debris were knotted to its hair. It was clearly frightened, and it was slightly limping on its right side. The adult in the trees had to be Shaq O'Neal height, with much more hair and wider shoulders. I sat in the same spot, 3 feet from the sinkhole, with mud all over me and my pistol sitting on my lap. I just had to catch my breath. I couldn't get the idea these animals are for real. I went home and knew if I didn't go back, I would never go hunting again. I did go back up the next day. I just stayed on the road the whole time. My hands were shaking a little. I went all the way. I didn't hunt. I just looked around. Then I relaxed a bit and started coming back. I came around a corner on the logging road, and right in the middle was my tree seat and 2 other things I had dropped on my way out. Then, honestly, I don't know what to call the other thing they left for me. It's pine cones and grass, some branches stacked. At least I think they wanted me to have it. I honestly don't know for sure, but it was directly on top of my stuff, and it's definitely being assembled. I still have it in a storage unit in Aberdeen, Washington. Thanks for letting me get this off my chest. I've been afraid to speak of this all these years. Only my wife knew about this. We live up north now, but when I go back down to Aberdeen, Washington, I can send you some photos of the object and see what you think. I stored it very, very safely. Thanks again to you and yours, Tony. Tony, I think we read this. Sounds familiar. The Aberdeen storage thing is full on, I remember that. That's an alarming one. Welcome to the club, right? I don't think he emailed his picture of that thing. Don't you hate being sick? Oh, it sucks. It just sucks. It sucks, but here we go. Listen to this. Retired Air Force. Share. Steve. For this encounter, I'll use the name Tom. I'm also using lots of punctuation. I'm a retired U.S. Air Force and still work government programs. I don't want to use my real name, not knowing how this might impact my position and career. Some of the people I worked with would think I'm crazy. Back in 2002, when I was stationed in the Seattle, Washington area, my family and I had decided to make one last RV trip before winter set in. I was looking for a remote location with very few amenities so I could legitimately test the capabilities of my new RV with larger storage tanks and a winter package. It had snowed recently at the site we chose, and the overnight lows were to be in the teens, so I thought it'd be a perfect test. My son, who was 13 at the time, asked to bring some friends along since the new RV was a bunkhouse style with 3 stacked bunks at the rear of the RV next to the bathroom. I always enjoyed taking my son's young friends since most of them rarely left the city or even put down the game controller to even eat their dinner. I had a rule that when we're RVing, there are no game consoles allowed. Cards or board games only. Most of the visiting kids moaned and complained at the thought, but once we got to the site, all that faded away as they went exploring for firewood or to find a walking staff, which was our tradition. They had to carve the staff themselves with their name, and on the final night of camp they could ceremoniously burn it in the fire. It's amazing how quickly kids will forget the Xbox when they're out in nature exploring. During my search, I was able to find a U.S. forestry primitive site that had a single half-mile loop off a logging road with 5 gravel sites. I had no idea these sites even existed until a friend told me about them. This place was the first come, first served, and the only creature comfort was a fancy 2-hole head. That's a bathroom. And some large seating areas with 3-foot circular fire rings at each of the 5 sites. I grabbed the site with the longest parking area so I could stay connected to my rig, which is about over 50 feet long. There's only one other couple at the site in a large tent and an SUV. Naturally, they pitched the site closest to the head. Our site was the closest site to the stream at the apex in the loop. The water was fast moving with rapids and a lot of deadfall. The stream measured about 50 meters wide at our site, and the water was naturally very cold. The sound was amazing as the water came down from the cloud-covered pines high above. Our fire pit consisted of 3 cut pine trees, one on each side of the 36-inch steel ring with the open end facing the water about 25 feet away. The view was spectacular, and the fact that it was free made it all that better. If you had a location like this for your home, it would cost you $1 million just for the land. After arriving and getting the site set up, we went looking for firewood. Unlike California, the Washington State Forestry had signs everywhere that said, "Please collect all the wood you wish. Please don't break branches off live trees." This was never an issue, as the amount of deadfall was off the charts. Within 20 minutes, we had a pile the size of a VW Beetle. Plenty to last through the evening. My son grabbed the axe and hatchet to make smaller, more manageable pieces out of the larger branches. After a standard camping dinner of mac and cheese, burgers, and dogs, we headed down to the fire ring. The RV sat about 50 yards away at 25 foot in elevation above the fire ring, with a winding path of low scrub that zigzagged down the hill to the ring. As we got the fire started, I was teaching the teens the proper way of building a fire from scratch. I used my knife and flint to get it rolling, and the new kids were amazed at this magic trick. I guess being a Boy Scout is frowned upon these days. The fire quickly rose to about 5 feet, and we all picked a log and sat back to enjoy the fire. The forestry site is very remote, with the closest man-made light about 20 miles away at the last small town we passed through on our way up the mountain. I'd given each of the boys a flashlight so they could find their way around at night. I told them that they will be very surprised at how dark it can get in the woods at night. That old cliche that you can't see your hand in front of your face is the real deal up here, as they would soon learn. About 30 minutes into our fire, I heard the first loud knock of what would be several more. I first thought it might have just been a tree falling in the woods, but it lacked then slow cracking and swoosh sound a tree makes as it hits the ground. A few minutes later, I heard a second, then a third. At this point, my wife asked if I'd heard the knocks. While the teens messed around with their flashlights, making scary faces and just being boys, I made my way over to the other side of the fire and sat next to my wife. I leaned over and whispered, "Sasquatch." She immediately hit my shoulder and said, "Shut up." I smiled and shook my head. I told her that that's one of the ways they communicate. She thought I was pulling her leg. She instinctively reached over to lift up my jacket to see if I had my handgun. Of course I did, but told her I would not shoot at the creature with a Glock 40 cal, as it would just piss it off. We both looked in the direction of the knocks as the moon, in and out of fast-moving clouds, lit up the stream and timber beyond. When the moon came out, it was surprisingly bright, even to the naked eye. You could pick out individual trees on the other side, even with our fire and our night vision compromised. My wife looked at me, this concerned look on her face, and said, "Don't say anything to the boys, they'll be up all night." We heard several more knocks, all of them coming from the other side of the stream. One sounded fairly close to the stream, I'd guess around 100 meters away, with the other one much further back in the woods, possibly 300 meters away. It got to be around 2300, so we decided to make our way up the trail to the RV. My wife cooked up a batch of popcorn and the boys played a few games. Sorry. The wife and I headed off to bed. The next day we got up early and prepared for a hike in the woods. I briefed the boys on what they should have in their backpacks and to stay close, no wandering off alone. I had a handheld GPS that I used for these types of hikes. I grew up in upstate New York and spent much of my young life in the Adirondack Mountains, so I have better than average experience in the woods, not counting my 23 years in the military. I also have pro-grade radios that can clearly reach up to 10 miles line of sight. I told the boys that there are a lot of dangerous animals in the woods, so sticking together was key. As with all kids not accustomed to being in the woods, they immediately scanned the woods expecting to see a bear or a mountain lion just sitting there staring at them. I always carry a firearm, and today was no exception. I had my daily carry 40 cal with multiple mags and a 12 gauge pump shotgun slung over my shoulder. We decided to cross the stream and make our way southwest through the woods and slightly uphill from the campsite. As we began to climb in elevation, the woods began to get fairly thick, but not as bad as I've seen This area had previously been clear-cut a few years ago, so it was fairly easy walking, and visibility through the woods was overall surprisingly good. About an hour in, we found a large stone outcropping and decided to sit down for a snack. The boys sat there looking across the vast wilderness. They scanned the area and each pointed out a few features in the distance, with the greenhorn boys truly in awe. Sadly, they had no idea there was a world like this out there. They all commented that it resembled some Tom Clancy video game where they were SEALs and had to find and destroy a Russian terrorist training camp. I just laughed at the thought of that being their only exposure to the woods. Yeah, it's kind of sad, isn't it? About 10 minutes into our break, as everyone just sat eating their snack, the woods became suddenly very silent. Even the boys thought something was up as they all turned back to look at me. One of them pulled up his long-sleeve shirt and showed the others his visible goosebumps and hair standing up the length of his arm. I had that same feeling. Something was not right. The only sound we heard was the wind high up in the tops of the pines. A few seconds later, I heard what sounded like a large branch snap just up the hill from our location. I estimate it was about 75 to 100 yards away. My son heard it too, and he stood up and we both looked up the hill. I heard another snap, and at first I thought it could be an elk. Then we heard a low grunt, very guttural, almost vibrating, and from very deep within, like a really bad chest cold, the kind that no amount of coughing can free up. I told the boys it was time to get moving and heading back so we could make lunch. They grabbed their packs. We slowly started our way down the path off the rock ledge. My son kept turning around and looking back up the hill. He looked at me, and I put my finger to my lips to keep quiet. The last thing I wanted was two city kids freaking out and running down a very dangerous path with cliffs and drop-offs. I believe they all sensed as no one was talking. My son took the lead with a sense of urgency and led the way down the trail. I walked backwards, watching and listening, checking our six. A few more branches snapped, and another deep grunt. This time, it was closer. That would just suck, man. Being responsible for somebody's children and having that happen there in the woods, that would be really, really shitty. I stared at the area where it had come from, but saw nothing. The ground leveled out, and shortly after, we could hear the faint sound of rushing water. We popped out of the stream about 50 yards north of where we had originally crossed. We had used several large trees that had fallen into the stream to cross earlier that morning. We made our way to the crossing point, and the boys took off on a run when my wife said the lunch was ready. I stood along the stream watching the woods where we had just come out. A short distance into the trees, maybe 30 meters, I saw something move. As I stared at the spot, there was nothing. If anything was there, it was frozen. There was too much brush to make out any shape or silhouette. Within a few seconds, I caught the first scent of something very sour, similar to the smell of my friend's wet hunting dog. Add to that the smell similar to roadkill or a lakeside dead fish. It was a mixture of smells, none of them pleasant. There was a very slight breeze coming down the slope towards the stream carrying the scent. After about 30 seconds, it subsided. My wife yelled and waved me over. I made my way to the logs and crossed the stream to the campsite. Later that afternoon, we collected more firewood for the evening and prepared dinner. Sunset would be around 1700, and with us being on the east side of the mountain, it came even quicker as the shadow quickly came over the site and temperatures began to drop. After an early dinner, the boys played around with the flint trying to make their own campfires. As everyone settled into their bag, the boys asked me to tell... As everyone settled onto their log, the boys asked me to tell them the story about how in 1973 I had seen a UFO in the dead of winter in upstate New York. Sensing my reluctance, my son pressed me along with my wife, saying, "Come on, Dad." As I began to tell the story, we heard a very loud woot. Even over the rush of the water, it was clear as day and extremely loud. So loud I can't imagine a human being capable of making such a sound. I stopped talking. Everyone looked towards the stream. One of the boys asked, "What was that?" About 10 seconds later, we heard a second one. Woot! This time it seemed closer. I looked across the stream and noticed a pointed head, or what looked like a head, and very wide shoulders. Very dark against the tree branches behind it, which were lit in the very clear moonlight. There's a horizontal branch on a large spruce across the stream from us that I estimated was about 8 feet off the ground. I could clearly see the head and shoulders over the branch. It stood there motionless. I slowly stood up, not taking my eyes off of it, and pointed towards the branch. My wife stood next to me, looking in the direction of my arm. I don't see it. Where? I whispered the location of the branch, transfixed, almost afraid to even blink, feeling I'd never see the image again. Finally, my wife saw it too. She squeezed my hand very tightly and was clearly scared. She pulled the boys over to her and told them where to look. She sat on the edge of the log, pointing. As my wife pointed towards it, they each looked down her arm as if sighting in a new optic. One of the boys clearly saw it and asked, "What is that? It's really big." I told them to stay very quiet, and I told them it's a Bigfoot, thinking they may not know the term Sasquatch, but they would surely understand Bigfoot. Almost in unison, they all looked at me like I had two heads and said, "No way." It was then that we heard another very loud knock on a tree. For the first time, this knock came from our side of the stream, from northeast of us, possibly along the logging road. The hair on everyone's neck stood straight up. It's a sensation I will never forget. Realizing it was closer and clearly not the same one we were watching, my wife gathered up the boys and headed up the trail to the RV. Each of them ran on the trail, using their flashlights and scanning in every direction. When I turned back around and located the spot, it was gone. I scanned the area to make sure I was looking at the same location. I easily picked out the branch that the head and shoulders, but the head and shoulders were gone. There was a very intense feeling of being watched, and I had goosebumps all over my body. My wife gently called down to me asking if it was still there. I told her it was gone. She then said, "I can still feel it." Yeah, me too. The next morning was much colder and light snow began to fall. We were a few hours from packing up and heading back to civilization. While the boys ate breakfast, I asked my wife to come down to the fire ring and confirm with me the location of where the creature was standing. I wanted to go get a measurement. In my mind, I looked across the stream and found the spot. Not wanting to lead my wife into agreeing with me on the location, I asked her to point it out. I stood next to her as she pointed. "You see that rock next to the stream, the one that has the large tree resting on it? Straight up from there is that branch that he was looking over." She had confirmed the spot that I had picked out. I asked her to stay put while I went to that location. I crossed the stream, parallel the water, looking back at my wife about 75 yards away. She just kept pointing upstream and yelled, "Keep going." When I got to the location, she yelled, "Stop right there." I scanned the few trees around me and walked towards the water. As I made my way to the location, I looked up and saw the branch. My wife stood there with her arms folded, trying to stay warm, her head nodding up and down. I'm a little over 6 feet tall and could reach up and touch the branch. If I jumped up, I could easily grab it and swing on it like a chin-up bar. I estimated the branch was about 88 to 96 inches off the ground. The creature's head and shoulders were clearly well above the branch that night, so he had to be at least 100 to 110 inches tall, or well over 8 feet. During the nearly 3-hour drive home, the boys talked about everything they'd done and said how much fun they had had and repeatedly thanked us for taking them along. I asked them if the event from the night before changed any thoughts they had on the existence of Bigfoot. They all said, "It's real for sure. Yeah, we saw it." Having been young once, I knew this adventure would stick with them for a lifetime. I asked them if they missed their Xbox, and they said, "No way. This is way better than any game." Steve, thanks for hosting this forum. It's refreshing to see a place where folks can open up their encounters with these very intelligent creatures. Too many sites today have their obligatory goon squads and trolls to call people names, embarrass them, or make them wish they just stayed silent. Keep up the great work. All right, and I will. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for your generous donation of your time. We appreciate that a lot. I'd be stressed right out having somebody's children with me. I normally stick like glue to Sarah, the kids, if we're ever out where something might go down. Especially after listening to the Missing 9411 episodes, right? This is titled I'm 62 and have told this twice. Hey Steve, use my name if you want. I really don't give a shit if someone has a problem with it. If someone wants to come and see me over this, I'll arrange for you to get my address. Yeah, come to my door, please. This is an elaboration on a two-story email sent February 7th, 21. I don't know if you have read it already. Anyway, I sent it. And then a while later, hence this date, I proofed it. Imagine that, proofing after sending. Yeah, I can imagine anything. I'm changing my email writing and sending technique. I realized I had missed some information that is pertinent to the story. I also realized in the second story I had added too much information, but these stories need to be heard for the benefit of all. Here's the rewrite of the two stories. I'm 62 years old. I've told this story once or twice to who I thought were close friends. You know, tell them anything and expect arguments and agreements. Well, they just shut me down. Well, after them, we don't talk much anymore. In the mid to late 70s, I worked in a shipyard in northern BC. The on-site security guard was a big man in his late 60s to early 70s. He stood 6'3" in his aged and hunched over state and was about 260 pounds. His story, quote, in my early days at 38 years old, I stood 6'6" at 280 and solid. I was prospecting in the Hazelton, BC area mountains. On one of my return trips to civilization, I was walking down a logging road. I was walking down a logging road, cut back after cut back. The next cut in the road was about 150 yards away with a small grove of trees in the turn. As I'm walking down, two of them came around the corner holding hands, a big one and a little one. They walked off the road into the shade. As I come up to the point at which they stepped off the road, I could see them standing in the shade. I assumed the big one was female, and she was way bigger than me in all dimensions. As they were not a threat, I kept my .30-06 slung over my shoulder. I waved without looking and carried on walking. Just before I rounded the corner, I looked back to see them come out and carry on up the road. I spent 30 years in the bush, heard a lot of different sounds I could not explain. That was the only time I'd ever seen them. End quote. I asked at that point if the unexplainable sounds were heard in the Hazelton Mountains. No, he says. Those sounds I heard when I was in northern Ontario. We never did figure what it was. We were there, I think he said, in the same area for 3 weeks. There was some weird shit, but we finished collecting samples and data and got the hell out of there. Skip ahead to September 2019. I can't remember the date. My lady and I are sitting out on the deck having an evening beverage. We are in the Columbia River Valley, Rocky Mountains on one side and the Purcell Range on the other. There is 200 or more head of cattle and 20 dogs in the valley. West across the river from our location, all of them are yelling at the top of their lungs. So you can imagine the racket. I was thinking to myself, this is weird. Why are they all yelling? I didn't say anything about it. However, over the dull roar, we're able to converse. My lady was sitting about 4 feet from the door. I was across from her. And all of a sudden, from across the valley, and coming from within a canyon, this loud roar started, and all my hair stood on end. I'm sure hers did as well. A millisecond after the roar started, she was up and in the door. All the animals in the valley stopped for 2 or 3 seconds, total silence, as the roar faded. Then all the animals started yelling again. Now, if you've ever been at a railroad crossing waiting for an oncoming train, 50 yards on average from the crossing, the conductor will blow the horn. Even knowing that it's coming, when it does, it is known the tones of the horn are the most audible to animals, humans included. It generally starts your hair standing up and gives you a chill which lasts a few seconds. Now think of this. Lower the tones of the horn, increase the volume. The result is a hair-raising, bone-chilling vibration, and yes, vibration, not sound. I know this. I've been a rock musician, guitarist for 25 years. I know tones and notes. That is, every hair, every bone, every pore feels it. And this is the most unmistakable yet mostly debated topic. Whether the story is oral, passed for centuries from generation to generation with totems, masks, and dances. Tens of thousands of people sharing stories globally. Written, David Thompson in the 1700s, Lewis and Clark, Daniel Boone to name a few. Recorded, let's see how many pictures, videos, audio recordings does it take to not acknowledge. Go figure. Great adventure of honest communication for those in the know and those who are searching for answers. You're doing an awesome job, brother. Keep the information rolling. We all know it's working. As you can tell from my intro, I'm a no-nonsense kind of guy. I like it this way. Robert O'Cabe. Robert, appreciate you, man. I may have read this back in the day, but there's nothing I can do about it, you guys. For all the new people here, which there's a bunch, my previous phone was done, cleared. How? I don't know. But I had around 2,000 emails copied and pasted into it in my notes, and all unread. And the sad thing about it is when I go into my email inbox and crack it open, it's marked as read. And then I copy and paste it into my notes on my phone. So now I have over 2,000 emails that are marked as read in my email inbox amongst over 20,000 other ones. So unfortunately, guys, you're going to have a little bit of patience with me if we do get repeats, all right? It's just is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it except keep going. And it's painless. And you know what? Like I said before, if it makes you angry, well, you just apply for your refund for the ticket you paid at the door to get here. Right? All right. One more, and then I got to go do something. I am so achy right now. Stupid. All right, here we go. 1953 and an avid hunter. Steve, I'm 53 years old and an avid hunter, trapper, and fisherman. I was even on the Outdoor Channel for a time as I was a pro staffer for a game call company and we had a TV show. I apologize for the length of this, but I have to tell this to someone that will take it seriously. I saw my first Sasquatch when I was 12 on a family visit to Muir Woods in California. I was obsessed with steelhead, and there was a stream full of them right next to the walking path. I let my family get closer to the fish. I guess I was about 100 yards away from my family when I rounded a bend in the stream. I climbed over a big rock, and at about 30 yards, a guy squatted on the edge of the river. We locked eyes, and it seemed like he was trying to kill me with his stare. As he stood up, I could not believe how fast he moved. His hair was dark brown. His face only had hair around the edges, and he kept his eyes on me as he literally stepped across the creek. I saw grayish hair on his back and muscles like a bodybuilder. The creek was like 20 feet across, and he cleared it with one hop. I could not get out of there fast enough. No one believed my story, not my parents, my brother, or anyone for that matter. Jump forward to the year 2000. I'm married and living in northern New Jersey. I shot a huge buck one morning early, and the arrow seemed a bit far back. I decided to give it some time as it was November, and I was coaching football at the high school nearby. I went to the game with the intention of tracking the deer after the game. We followed the blood trail about 150 yards to where the deer died. Steve, you know what the ground looks like when a bow-killed deer expires. There was a 10-foot circle covered with blood and hair. Blood like someone spilled a 5-gallon pail. But no deer. The bears are huge here. But a bear would have chowed on the deer first, then dragged it a distance, and either hit it or left it to come back to. There were no drag marks. No blood trail. Nothing but my carbon arrow broken into little 4 or 5 inch pieces. Turkey season the following year, I was hunting behind my house every morning of the season, about a square mile of private land. I kept jumping what I thought was a bear on the edge of a swamp at the base of a steep ridge. It happened 4 or 5 times in the dark, and the bear would move off about 50 yards and stop. It was always at first light, and I was hoping to hear the turkeys gobble on the roost. One morning I was late getting out, so I was creeping slower than usual, an owl hooting as I walked. When I got near the area where I was jumping the bear, I stopped to owl hoot. As I did, I heard someone running toward the ridge. It was the thump thump of a two-legged being. Their feet hitting the ground, not the leaf shuffling a bear makes on the run. When I saw it, as it neared the top of the ridge, taking these huge strides, he ran up what I would literally have to use all fours to get up. As he topped the ridge, all I could see was the face staring at me from when I was 12. I knew what it was. I haven't slept right since. At our camp 20 miles from my home, we had a deer taken from the inside of a pickup with a cap on it. The T-handles of the cap were closed but not locked. Whatever took the deer had put his hands on top of the cap and left marks where the hair on its arms had disturbed the dust and dirt. The guys I was hunting with just said, "A bear took it." How many bears can open T-handles and walk away with a 100-pound doe, leaving no drag marks or evidence? They mimic the owl calls from a distance when I'm turkey hunting sometimes, and shadow me on my way out of the woods after deer hunting. People have laughed at me forever for what I've told them is out there. I am so thankful that you are doing what you are doing. I'm a big dude, 6'4", 300 pounds. These things could twist my head off, like if I opened a beer bottle. I coyote hunt at night a few times a week all winter, usually alone, not anymore. I scouted a spot on the state land one Saturday after deer season ended to coyote hunt later after dark. Driving around 10 p.m., I came along a 6-inch tree across the road that was just wide enough for one truck. I'd just been there a few hours before in the daylight. I got out to move it, but the tree had been twisted around 5 feet off the ground and bent over the road. As I looked at it, I felt like I was being watched. The feeling of impending doom swept over me. They did not want me in there. So I jumped in, got the hell out of there. I'm never going to stop doing what I love to do, hunting and fishing, but it is not the same once you know you are not out here alone. There's something about knowing you are not the top dog in the woods. I know you know what I mean. They walk around my house at night in the summer. They shout at me sometimes when I'm out hunting. They are here, and no one wants to admit it. The BFRO idiots were more concerned about having me pay $400 to go on their freaking expedition than coming up to see the area where I live. As soon as I said they were human-like and not apes, they dismissed me like I never existed. Keep pumping out the videos, brother. I know how time-consuming it is, but just getting us off my chest as someone that also knows these damn things, as you described them, exist is helping like you can't imagine. Many thanks, brother. Jimmy G. Jimmy G, I may have read this. Sounds familiar. Oh well. Glad I read it again. I'm super appreciative of your time you donate to all the people here. How many people, right? How many people have basically had their faces spit in from that group of people? How many? Some people might think I'm being mean, being negative, saying bad things. I'm not saying shit. I'm just relaying the truth. You heard the man speak from first hand. It's the truth. Can't make that shit up. Right? Various people in that group and linked to that group have done all they could to terrorize some very kind, very knowledge-filled women. They assisted to annihilate one special lady's career, a doctor, our special, well-loved DNA scientist. Annihilated her career. She had to live basically in poverty because of what those people did to her. Right? Sorry. I'm a natural protector. I can't help it. It makes me growl, especially when women and children are preyed on, let alone the people altogether, right? But these people have annihilated various people's character. They've taken in the honest testimonies of so many good people, ignored them, changed the stories, or shunned them, or ridiculed them. That's pretty dark, right? That is very dark. So if you are dark and you do these things onto others, that's where you create. You create your own darkness. You create all the bullshit that comes back your way. You create it. Right? There you go. That's my rant on those guys, but I'm feeling pretty sick and achy right now, so it's not too hard for me to go down the negative route for a few minutes, right? But sometimes these things have got to be said. They have to be said. People need to be made aware. Excuse me, I don't know why. I said it before, I don't know why. There are so many people in our communities that do real shitty things, whether it be to their wife or their kids or somebody, and everybody in the community knows, but nobody says anything. They go, hey, hear about Frank Smith over there? He's been beating the crap out of his wife. Oh my God, no way. And nobody says shit. As an example. Unfortunately, maybe or fortunately, I don't know. I'm the guy that sees Frank Smith in the grocery store, and I'm going to say it out loud. Hey Frank, been beating on your wife lately? You sack of shit. In public. That's just me. I think that's how everybody should be. And I know, I'm just using it as a rough example. I know that on average that doing something like that can make it worse for the poor woman. So I'm not directly saying that instance. I'm just saying as an example, somebody doing real shitty things, and I run into them. It's not good on average. And I'm not saying what filthy things they do, but I know one thing. If you guys put me on one of those stages with these clowns in front of an audience of people, it wouldn't be good. I'd be all over them. I would be all over them. All over them. I wouldn't hold back for a tenth of a second. I'd be in their face, talking to the people, pointing at their nose, saying, this is what you guys have been doing. Why? Why'd you do this to this kind lady? Why'd you do that to that other kind lady? Why'd you do this to these other kind of people? Why are you misleading all these people sitting here in the audience? You pieces of... There you go. Okay, I better get out of here. I don't feel good. I feel really sick right now, achy and chilly. And I better shut up now. I'm going to go chop up my salmon and start boiling my jars, and then I'm going to sit there and get a whole bunch of salmon canned. All right. Share my story at howtohunt.com. That's where you get your truth heard word for word, no matter how outrageous you might think it is. It's obviously not today.